The silence was the worst part. The kind of silence that screams louder than any argument, that echoes the emptiness they left behind. I sat on the floor, the remnants of what was supposed to be a celebratory dinner scattered around me like fallen leaves, each piece a painful reminder of what I had lost. They had taken everything, not just my job, not just my reputation, but something far more precious, my faith in the people I loved. They thought they had broken me, that I would simply disappear, fade into the background of their perfectly constructed lives. If you would give anything to protect your sister, subscribe now. My sister Emily had always been the golden child. Beautiful, charming, effortlessly successful, she seemed to glide through life, while I, Quinn, tripped and stumbled my way through. I never begrudged her that. In fact, I reveled in her successes, proud to be her sister, her confidant. Christmas was our thing. Every year, no matter how far apart we were, we'd spend Christmas together, baking cookies, decorating the tree, watching the same old movies. It was our sacred tradition. So when Emily called in late November, her voice tight and strained, I knew something was wrong. "Quinn," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, I don't think we should do Christmas this year." My heart sank. What? Why? Is everything okay? I asked, my mind racing through a dozen possibilities. It's just, with everything that's going on in your life, it might be better if you just focused on yourself, she said, the words laced with a thinly veiled pity that stung more than I cared to admit. My life's a mess, is that what you're saying? I retorted, my voice sharper than I intended. There was a pause, a beat of uncomfortable silence, before she spoke again. I just think it would be less stressful for everyone, she replied, her tone now laced with a cool detachment that sent a shiver down my spine. I hung up the phone, the words echoing in my head. Less stressful for everyone. Was I really such a burden? Was my life so chaotic that I was ruining everyone else's Christmas? I tried to shake it off, to tell myself that she was just trying to be helpful, but the seed of doubt had been planted, and it began to take root. The following week, I arrived at the office, determined to put the conversation with Emily behind me and focus on work. I was a senior marketing manager at a reputable firm, a position I had worked tirelessly to achieve. I loved my job, the challenges it presented, the creativity it demanded. As I walked towards my office, I noticed a figure standing near the door, talking to my assistant. It was Emily's boyfriend, Mark. I frowned. What was he doing here? Mark was smooth. Too smooth. He had that salesman charm that made me instinctively distrust him. I'd always been polite for Emily's sake, but something about him made my skin crawl. He flashed that practiced smile as I approached. Quinn.
Just the person I was looking for, he said, extending a hand. I shook it, my grip firm but wary. Mark, what brings you here? I asked, my eyes narrowed slightly. Just wanted to drop off some paperwork for Emily, he said, gesturing to a file he was holding. She mentioned you might be able to help her with something. I raised an eyebrow. Emily had never mentioned anything about needing my help with paperwork. Sure, I said, playing along. Come on in. As I turned to unlock my office, I caught a glimpse of Mark's face. It wasn't the charming, practiced smile he usually wore. This was something else, something colder, something predatory. The feeling of unease intensified, a knot forming in my stomach. I had no idea how right my instincts were. The person I trusted most was one of them. My office felt different with Mark inside, tainted somehow. He handed me the file, his eyes lingering on mine a moment too long. Emily said you'd know what to do with this, he said, his voice a low murmur. I took the file, my fingers brushing against his. It was a simple touch, but it sent a jolt of something through me. Disgust? Unease? I couldn't quite place it. I opened the file, expecting to find routine documents, but what I saw made my blood run cold. It was a performance review, but not just any performance review. It was mine, and it was devastating, filled with accusations of incompetence, missed deadlines, and unprofessional behavior. All lies,
complete fabrications. I looked up at Mark, my eyes blazing. "What is this?" I demanded, my voice trembling with anger. He shrugged, a smirk playing on his lips. "Just doing my girlfriend a favor," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "She's been wanting to get rid of you for a while now. Says you're dead weight." The words hit me like a physical blow. Emily? Wanting to get rid of me? My own sister? It couldn't be true. But the file in my hands, the look on Mark's face, it was all too real. Before I could react, my boss, Mr. Thompson, walked into my office, his face grim. "Quinn, can I see you in my office now?" he said, his voice devoid of any warmth. I followed him, the file clutched tightly in my hand, my mind reeling. I knew what was coming. The meeting was brief, brutal, and utterly humiliating. Mr. Thompson didn't even bother to look me in the eye as he delivered the news. "We're letting you go, Quinn," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. "Your performance has been unsatisfactory." I tried to argue, to defend myself, but he cut me off. "The decision has been made," he said, his tone final. "HR will be in touch with the details." I walked out of his office in a daze, my world crumbling around me. I had been fired, based on lies, orchestrated by my own sister. I went back to my office, packed my belongings in a cardboard box, my hands shaking with rage and disbelief. As I walked out of the building, I saw Mark standing near the entrance, a triumphant smirk on his face.
He raised his hand in a mock salute. That image seared itself into my memory. The betrayal cut deeper than any professional setback ever could. The silence that followed was deafening, a constant reminder of the injustice I had suffered. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. Night after night I lay awake, replaying the events in my head, trying to make sense of it all. Why would Emily do this to me? What had I done to deserve this? The questions swirled around in my mind, unanswered, leaving me feeling lost and alone. I tried calling Emily, but she wouldn't answer. I sent her text messages, pleading with her to talk to me, to explain what was going on, but she ignored them all. It was as if I had ceased to exist in her world. Desperate, I tried to reach out to other family members, hoping to find some support, some understanding, but they all seemed to be taking Emily's side, dismissing my concerns as paranoia or jealousy. "Emily would never do anything to hurt you, Quinn," my mother said, her voice laced with exasperation. "You're just being dramatic." Her words were like a knife twisting in the wound. I was alone, utterly and completely alone. With each passing day, the weight of the injustice grew heavier, crushing me under its immense pressure. I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air in a sea of betrayal and lies. I knew I couldn't let them get away with this. I couldn't let them destroy my life and walk away unscathed. But how could I fight back? They had all the power, all the resources. I was just one person, broken and defeated, or so they thought. What they didn't realize was that beneath the surface of my despair, a fire was beginning to burn, a fire of anger, of resentment, of a burning desire for revenge. They had made a grave mistake. They had underestimated me. They thought they could break me, but they had only made me stronger. They had awakened something inside me that I never knew existed, a darkness that was about to consume them all. The silence they had forced upon me would soon be replaced by the deafening roar of my retribution. The game was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The days that followed were a blur of darkness and despair. I lost my appetite, food turning to ash in my mouth. Sleep offered no escape, only a relentless replay of the betrayal, each scene more vivid and agonizing than the last. I wandered through my apartment like a ghost, the once familiar space now a suffocating prison. The silence amplified my solitude, each tick of the clock a mocking reminder of my isolation. I found myself staring into the mirror for hours, barely recognizing the hollow-eyed stranger staring back. Was this really me? Had they truly managed to erase the person I once was? The weight of their actions pressed down on me, threatening to crush me completely. I considered just giving up, letting them win, disappearing into the shadows and leaving them to enjoy their victory.
The thought was tempting, a siren song promising an end to the pain. But even in my darkest moments, a tiny spark of defiance refused to be extinguished. It was a flicker of anger, a whisper of resentment, a refusal to let them define my existence. And that spark, however small, was enough to keep me from completely succumbing to the abyss. One evening, I found myself walking aimlessly through the city streets, the neon lights blurring into a hazy kaleidoscope of color. The sounds of the city, once a comforting symphony, now grated on my nerves, each honk and shout a painful reminder of the life I had lost. I stopped in front of a pawn shop, the window display filled with forgotten treasures and discarded dreams. A glint of metal caught my eye, a small silver locket, intricately engraved with a delicate floral design. Something about it resonated with me, a sense of forgotten beauty and resilience. I went inside, my hand trembling as I asked to see it. The shop owner, a wizened old man with kind eyes, placed it gently in my palm. It felt cool against my skin, a tangible connection to something real, something solid. I opened it, expecting to find a faded photograph, but it was empty, a blank canvas waiting to be filled. I bought it, the last of my dwindling savings, and clutched it tightly in my hand as I walked back to my apartment. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the locket lying before me. I stared at it for hours, lost in thought. It was a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the face of utter devastation, there was still the possibility of a new beginning. As the first rays of dawn crept through my window, I made a decision. I would not let them break me. I would not let them steal my life. I would fight back. But not with anger, not with emotion. With cold, calculated precision. I would use their own tactics against them, turn their lies into truths, their strengths into weaknesses. I would become the architect of their downfall, the puppeteer pulling the strings from the shadows. The first step was to gather information, to understand their motives, their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities. I started small, combing through old emails, social media posts, anything that could give me a glimpse into their world. I spent hours online, researching legal loopholes, financial irregularities, anything that could be used against them. It was tedious, painstaking work, but with each piece of information I uncovered, my resolve grew stronger. The more I learned, the more I realized how deeply flawed they were, how easily their carefully constructed facade could crumble. Their biggest weakness? They thought they were untouchable. They believed they were above the law, immune to the consequences of their actions, and that arrogance would be their undoing. I began to document everything, meticulously recording every detail of their betrayal, every lie they had told, every injustice they had committed. I knew that I needed proof, irrefutable evidence that would expose their deceit to the world. I started backing up all my company emails and files, creating a secret archive of their misdeeds. It was a dangerous game, one that could land me in serious trouble if I was caught, but I was past the point of caring about the consequences. I was fueled by a burning desire for justice, a need to right the wrongs that had been done to me. I started seeing a therapist, not for comfort, but for guidance. I needed to understand their psychology, their motivations, their patterns of behavior. I needed to learn how to manipulate them, how to exploit their weaknesses, how to turn them against each other. The therapist was initially hesitant, sensing the darkness that was brewing inside me, but I convinced her that I was not seeking revenge but justice, that I was not driven by hatred but by a need to protect myself and others from their deceit. Slowly, she began to open up, sharing her insights and expertise, helping me to understand the minds of my tormentors. The therapist said, "Their confidence is their downfall. Feed their egos, lull them into a false sense of security. Then, when they least expect it, strike." I realized she was right. Their arrogance was their greatest vulnerability, and I would use it against them. From that moment on, I was no longer a victim. I was a planner, a strategist, a predator, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The game had changed, and they had no idea what was coming. I smiled. I played their game. I acted the broken fool. But I was recording everything. Every email, every phone call, every meeting, all meticulously documented and backed up on secure, encrypted servers. I even invested in a high-quality audio recorder, discreetly hidden in my purse, to capture their conversations when they thought I wasn't around. The more they gloated, the more they revealed. I was careful to maintain the facade of a defeated woman, agreeing to their terms, signing the severance papers without protest. They ate it up, convinced that they had won. But every concession was a calculated move, a tactical retreat designed to lull them into a false sense of security. I even went so far as to publicly thank Emily for her support during this difficult time, posting a saccharine message on social media that made my skin crawl. She responded with a flurry of heart emojis and a patronizing comment about how everything happens for a reason. I wanted to vomit, but I just smiled and liked her comment. Inside, I was charting their downfall. Every digital breadcrumb was fuel.
One afternoon, while cleaning out my desk, I accidentally stumbled upon a file containing some rather interesting financial records. It seemed that Mark had been siphoning off company funds into a private account, using a complex web of shell corporations to hide his tracks. The amounts were substantial, enough to land him in serious legal trouble. I carefully photographed every document, ensuring that the images were clear and legible, before returning the file to its place. Another piece of the puzzle fell into place. As I gathered more and more evidence, I realized that I was walking a dangerous line. If they suspected what I was up to, they wouldn't hesitate to silence me. I knew I had to be careful, to cover my tracks, to anticipate their every move. I started using a VPN to encrypt my internet traffic, scrubbing my computer's hard drive regularly, and creating multiple fake email accounts to communicate with my sources. I even took a crash course in digital forensics, learning how to detect and prevent surveillance, how to cover my digital tracks. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about survival. There were close calls. One evening, I received a strange phone call, a distorted voice on the other end, warning me to back off before it was too late. I immediately hung up and traced the call, but the number was untraceable, a burner phone likely purchased with cash. I knew they were watching me. They knew something was up. I had to move faster. I decided to accelerate my plan, to bring everything to a head sooner rather than later. The anticipation was almost unbearable, a constant knot of anxiety twisting in my stomach. I knew that once I unleashed my plan, there would be no turning back. Lives would be shattered, reputations ruined, and relationships destroyed. But I couldn't let fear paralyze me. I had come too far, sacrificed too much, to back down now. The exact day they tried to end me, I exposed the truth. The final piece of the puzzle came unexpectedly. I was reviewing Emily's social media, a task that always filled me with a mixture of revulsion and morbid fascination, when I noticed a post that contained a crucial piece of information. She was planning a surprise birthday party for Mark at a fancy restaurant downtown. The restaurant had security cameras, both inside and outside the building, and Emily, in her infinite arrogance, had tagged the location in her post. It was the perfect opportunity. The exact day they tried to end me, I exposed the truth. I formulated a meticulous plan, timing everything down to the second. I contacted a journalist I knew, a seasoned investigative reporter who had a reputation for taking down corrupt corporations and exposing white-collar criminals. I provided her with all the evidence I had gathered, the financial records, the emails, the audio recordings, everything. She was initially skeptical, but after reviewing the evidence, she was convinced. She agreed to run the story, but only if I could provide her with irrefutable proof of their conspiracy. That's where the restaurant's security cameras came in. On the night of the party, I arrived at the restaurant early, disguised in a wig and glasses. I discreetly disabled several of the security cameras, focusing on the ones that would capture the most damning footage. Then, using a sophisticated hacking device I had purchased online, I tapped into the restaurant's security system, gaining access to all the live feeds. I waited patiently, monitoring the situation as Emily and Mark arrived with their guests. They were all dressed to the nines, laughing and joking, completely oblivious to the storm that was about to break. As the party progressed, I started uploading the incriminating footage to a secure server, ensuring that it would be safe from tampering. Then, at precisely 9 p.m., I sent the journalist a text message. It's time. The journalist released her story, along with all the evidence I had provided her, to a major national news outlet. The story went viral within minutes, spreading like wildfire across the internet. The restaurant erupted in chaos. Phones rang, accusations flew, and the carefully constructed facade of their perfect lives crumbled before their very eyes. They lost everything, and I just smiled. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. Mark was escorted from the restaurant in handcuffs, facing charges of embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy.
Emily's reputation was destroyed. She was publicly shamed, ostracized by her friends and colleagues, and forced to resign from her job. Their carefully constructed world crumbled into dust, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. I watched it all unfold from the safety of my apartment, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me. It was over. I had won. But the victory felt hollow, empty. The pain of their betrayal still lingered, a dull ache in my heart. I knew that I would never truly be free of the scars they had left behind, but I had at least managed to exact my revenge. And in doing so, I had reclaimed my life. The news coverage was relentless. Every channel, every newspaper, every website was plastered with their faces, their misdeeds laid bare for the world to see. The public outcry was deafening, a chorus of condemnation and outrage. Mark's company stock plummeted, wiping out his fortune overnight. His assets were frozen, his accounts seized, and his lavish lifestyle came to an abrupt end. He went from being a celebrated CEO to a pariah, shunned by everyone he knew. Emily fared no better. She was relentlessly trolled online, her social media accounts flooded with hateful messages. Her friends and family turned their backs on her, unwilling to be associated with her scandal. She became a cautionary tale, a symbol of greed, ambition, and moral decay. Even my mother finally saw the truth, calling me in tears to apologize for not believing me.
Her words were a balm to my wounded soul, a small measure of comfort in the midst of the chaos. But it wasn't enough to erase the pain. It wasn't enough to undo the damage they had done. The journalist became a media sensation, lauded for her courage and integrity in exposing the truth. She received numerous awards and accolades, and her career skyrocketed. She thanked me profusely for providing her with the information, acknowledging that without me, the story would never have seen the light of day. I remained anonymous, content to stay in the shadows, watching from afar as justice was served. I didn't want the attention, the fame, the notoriety. I just wanted to be left alone, to rebuild my life, to heal from the wounds of the past. I started a new job at a small nonprofit organization, working to help victims of corporate fraud and abuse. It was fulfilling work, a way to channel my anger and resentment into something positive. I found solace in helping others, in using my experience to make a difference in the world. I also started seeing a new therapist, someone who could help me process the trauma I had endured and move forward with my life. It was a long and difficult journey, but with each passing day, I felt myself growing stronger, more resilient, more capable of facing whatever challenges life threw my way. I learned to forgive myself for the mistakes I had made, for the trust I had misplaced, for the pain I had allowed myself to endure. I learned to let go of the anger and resentment that had consumed me for so long, to replace it with compassion, understanding, and hope. The locket, the one I had bought at the pawn shop, became my talisman, a reminder of my strength, my resilience, and my ability to overcome adversity. I filled it with a picture of myself, smiling, confident, and free. But even as I began to heal, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing, that there was still one loose end that needed to be tied up. Mark and Emily had paid the price for their actions, but there were others who had been complicit in their scheme, who had knowingly turned a blind eye to their misdeeds. And they were still out there, living their lives, enjoying the fruits of their corruption. I knew that I couldn't let them get away with it. I knew that I had to bring them to justice as well. The information I had gathered was like a loaded weapon, and I wasn't afraid to use it. The documents I had taken detailed not only Mark's crimes, but the names of everyone who had helped him, who had profited from his schemes, who had covered up his tracks. Lawyers, accountants, board members, all of them were implicated in their conspiracy. I had copies of everything, safely stored on encrypted servers, ready to be unleashed at a moment's notice. I started quietly reaching out to the authorities, providing them with anonymous tips, guiding them towards the evidence they needed to build their cases. I knew that it was a risky game, one that could expose me to danger, but I was willing to take the chance. I owed it to myself, to the other victims of their greed, to ensure that justice was served. The trap was set. All the players were in place. It was time to spring it. The lawyers, the accountants, the board members, all of them received a summons. They had no idea who was coming for them. The game was about to get very interesting. The night before the grand jury convened, I received a package. No return address. Inside, a single photograph. Me, walking down the street. The crosshairs of a sniper scope were digitally imposed on my forehead. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through the numbness I had cultivated. This wasn't just about money or power anymore. This was about my life. But they had made a mistake. They thought they could scare me into silence. They underestimated my resolve. The next morning, I walked into the grand jury room, head held high, the photograph clutched in my hand. I placed it on the table, a silent testament to their desperation. Then I began to speak. I laid out the entire scheme, piece by piece, detail by detail. I presented the evidence I had gathered, the financial records, the emails, the audio recordings, all meticulously organized and cross-referenced. I named names. I pointed fingers. I left no stone unturned. As I spoke, I watched their faces in the gallery. The lawyers, the accountants, the board members, their expressions shifted from arrogance to disbelief to dawning horror. They realized they had been outmaneuvered, that their carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down around them. One of the board members, a man I had known for years, a man who had always treated me with disdain, started to sweat profusely. He fumbled with his tie, his face turning ashen. Another, a high-powered lawyer, began to shake uncontrollably. He whispered something to his colleague, his voice barely audible. The air in the room was thick with tension, charged with anticipation. After hours of testimony, the grand jury returned its verdict. Indictments across the board. Every single person I had named was charged with multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. The courtroom erupted in chaos. The defendants wailed, their lawyers protested, and the media swarmed like vultures. I watched it all unfold, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me. It was over. They had lost. As the defendants were led away in handcuffs, I caught Emily's eye. Her face was a mask of fury and despair. She mouthed something at me, a string of venomous words that I couldn't quite make out. But I didn't care. Her power was gone. Her influence was diminished.
She was nothing more than a broken woman, facing the consequences of her actions. Mark was stone-faced, silent as he was dragged away, his eyes devoid of all emotion. The life he had built, the empire he had created, had vanished in an instant. He was a shell of his former self, stripped bare and exposed. The news of the indictments spread like wildfire, dominating the headlines for days. The public outcry was deafening. People were outraged, demanding justice for the victims of their greed. The lawyers, accountants, and board members who had once enjoyed positions of power and prestige were now pariahs, shunned by society and facing lengthy prison sentences. Their lives were ruined, their reputations tarnished beyond repair. In the aftermath, I retreated from the spotlight, seeking solace in anonymity. I changed my name, moved to a new city, and started a new life. I left the corporate world behind, choosing to focus on helping others. I volunteered at a local shelter, offering support and guidance to those who had been victimized by fraud and abuse. I found purpose in my work, a sense of fulfillment that had eluded me for so long. I also continued to see my therapist, working through the trauma I had endured and learning to trust again. It was a slow and painful process, but with each passing day, I felt myself growing stronger, more resilient, more capable of facing whatever challenges life threw my way. The locket I wore, the one I had bought at the pawn shop, became a symbol of my strength, a reminder of my ability to overcome adversity. I filled it with a picture of myself, smiling, confident, and free. The photograph they had sent me, the one with the crosshairs, I burned it. Watching the flames consume it, I felt a sense of closure, a release from the fear that had haunted me for so long. Years later, I received a letter. It was from Mark. He was writing from prison. He apologized for his actions, acknowledging the pain and suffering he had caused me. He claimed to have found religion, to have repented for his sins. I read the letter with a mixture of skepticism and pity. I didn't know if he was truly sorry, or if he was simply trying to manipulate me. But I didn't care.
His words had no power over me. I had moved on. I had healed. I had found peace. I crumpled the letter in my hand and tossed it into the trash. It was a relic of the past, a reminder of a life I no longer lived. I looked out the window at the bright sunshine and the vibrant city. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with fresh air. I smiled. They lost everything. I just smiled. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.